I am an alcoholic. Chapter 2 from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this chapter is entitled, There is a Solution. The title alone gives me hope. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. I underline that. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. Because it's so important for alcoholics and drug addicts of our time today to know that there's a way, that there is a recovery, that there is a solving of a problem, and there it is in the first paragraph of Chapter 2, when there is a solution. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political and economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally wouldn't mix. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. One element in the powerful cement which binds us. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. This next line is one of the most beautiful lines that I have found in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Beautiful in the fact that it gives me my direction, it gives me my answer, and this is the way it reads. The tremendous fact, and I have underlined this, the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out in which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. I love it because of the common solution. I love it because it's these 100 drunks absolutely agree. I can visualize it years ago. They probably sat around the table and yak, and all of us say, hey, Bill, hey, Bobby, do we agree on it? Yes, absolutely. And they absolutely agreed, and that's what this line means. I embrace this line. I love this line. I love it because I don't have to disagree with anything that this book, that these chapters, the steps say. I don't have to, because I'm following this group of people. I'm a follower. I'm not a leader. And so I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree, the same as these 100 drunks, the people who wrote the book. They discovered this common solution. And that's the great news, that this book, when I found this book, when I began to follow this book, that this is what it meant to me. This is what this line meant to me. These lines are embraced by me. And because I got to live another day. I got to live one day, and I got to find out how. And when I came upon this line, wow, I don't have to fight anymore. I can agree. I don't have to have my opinions aren't important. Nothing. I just got to follow what they did. So that's what this line, is means to me. It also puts together the package for me. It begins my whenever I say, oh, maybe I should do, no, just do it this way. And that's what this, and it says that it starts out, the tremendous fact. It can't be any better explained. Anything I say here on my words are really irrelevant, but I just want to share the excitement of what this and the experience of what this line has meant to me. And this is what the book has meant to me. It's not just words; they're experiences. And each little line that I bring up, might have I might get a little over enthusiastic. So please bear with me. And also, I'm not the greatest reader in the world, but bear with me on that. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. I underline this next line on page 18. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in no way. Involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. An illness of this sort, and we have become to believe it an illness. I got an illness, so it's an illness. I believe it. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. That sort of encompasses a lot. It doesn't leave too much out. That's the alcoholic. That's the one with the illness, the alcoholic illness. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. And there's a little hope line for somebody. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and doctor. And this next line is so beautifully put. And I just I'll read it to you first. I've underlined it. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. I'm going to read it one more time. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, and is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. One drunk talking to another. Isn't that beautiful? Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. How true it is. I, as a drunk, can talk to so many people, but you just don't understand. But talking to another drunk, and where the problem has been solved, I can't say to them, you don't understand. Because you see, they do. And that's such a powerful line to have under my belt and to be able to understand it and comprehend it and know it. Because this is the miracle. One drunk talking to another. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude holier than thou, and I underline this, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. Nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. That there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to endure. I did not underline that, but isn't this amazing what it says here? Remember, they're all important lines. And I'm pointing out my lines that I've underlined, but the other ones that I haven't underlined are just as important, but sometimes Otherwise, if we underline everything, it'll be all underlined, and I don't want to do that. So the book will just be underlined in a few spots for you. That there are no fees to pay. That's the first one. So anybody selling this program, or it can't be. There are no fees. That's what it says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. No fees to pay. Very important. No axes to grind. No people to plead. No lectures to endure. And it goes on and it gives you this powerful, powerful next sentence. These are the conditions we have found most effective. And if those aren't the conditions, then it's not going to be effective. That's so it just stands to reason. These are the conditions we have found, these 100 drunks found, most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. Wow. Wow. None of us, and I underline this because many people say, well, I don't have the time. This next line gives you the answer to that feeling or sense of insecurity or whatever one wants to put it into. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work. Just as plain and simple. Nor do we think its effectiveness would increase if we did. So in other words, my effectiveness will not increase if I make a sole vocation of this work. How powerful of a line that is. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. So to the people who always worry about, oh, I can't, I don't devote, I don't... No, there's a much more important demonstration of these principles in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in this sort of effort, which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. If we kept on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? I have underlined that line. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? It's a question mark there. But notice it says freely given us. It's the second time it mentions about freely. Freely given us. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. I underline this next line. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. Experience and knowledge. The combined experience and knowledge. How powerful. This suggests a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. It's so cut. It's right there up in front. I underlined those lines right there because it tells me what they're giving me and what they're suggesting to me, and if I got a problem with drinking, what I got to do here. Wow, terrific. Of necessity, there will have to be discussions of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are, from the very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. How beautifully they put that. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. That's what their hope was, these 100 drunks. And if I tie that in with the first, common solution and absolutely agree, they have no basis for contention or argument, and that's what they tried to do. This next line, we shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Now, this next line is a powerful line at best. I'm going to read it. It's underlined. And most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. I'm going to read it one more time. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints, real tolerance of shortcomings and viewpoints, tolerance of those things, and a respect for their opinions, I don't have to go along with it, is an attitude, or are attitudes, which make us more useful to others. So if I can hear somebody else's viewpoint, if I can tolerate somebody else's viewpoint and tolerate somebody else's shortcomings, and I can respect their opinions, I'm able to sit back and say, how I'm more of use to them. I learned that it has taken me many years to incorporate that very line into my life. I mean, many's and many's of times and opportunities during the course of a day am I able to incorporate that line. Just listen. I don't have to. I just got to respect it. And over a period of years, I've been able to do it somewhat. Remember, I'm not perfect at that one because that's a tough one. But at least I have something to do. I can respect and I can tolerate a little bit. And there are two of my big shortcomings. One of them is tolerance in those areas. So it's a powerful, powerful line. The next line, still underlined. Now I underline those lines right there that I just read. And the next line I also underlined. I believe, this was the third line in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous that I got. I only remember 1, 2, and 3, and this is the third one. But I believe that this line can change the destiny of the world, not just an alcoholic, but the world, in a split second. And it goes like this. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depends upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. I believe that the world could be changed in a split second if everybody incorporated that one line into their lives. It took me 1 year when I found it, after I found it, 1 year to sit down, and I literally did, to try to think about another human being. And at the end of a year, I would wander off into, I got to think about this human being, and about 10 seconds had passed by, maybe 15, and all of a sudden I start wondering, how am I going to pay the rent? Or how am I going to pay the car payment? Or how am I going to pay my child support? Or what am I going to do this? And what am I going to do that? And how am I going to do this? And I don't have a job. And I said, wait a minute. I got to think about somebody else. And that's what used to go on with me. I at the end of a year, I literally could think about somebody else for a minimum of 20 seconds. And it was a real thrill for me. Over the course of the years that I've been sober, I've incorporated that line again into my life. And I've been able to at least offset that 20-second barrier, and I got into where I at least have a few hours, or maybe there's got to be hope that this program works, and I'm sober long enough that I can say, I've been able to do it for the better part of my day now. Think about or concentrate or put forth that effort, that energy into thinking about somebody else's needs. So, but it's taken a long time, several years, it took to be able to incorporate that into my life. But I believe the destiny of the world could be changed if everybody thought about somebody else's needs. In a split second, the whole world would change. So that's in our book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why. In the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? I underline this next line. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. That's pretty heavy. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. Specifically, we shall tell you what we have done. So I underline both those two lines there. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some of the points we as we see them. Summarize. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinking, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. Back of them, back of those things that people say, is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. I can understand that. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of a hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. That's a hard drinker that can impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. Now that's with a hard drinker, a few years before his time. It is sufficiently strong enough, if sufficiently strong enough reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or a warning from the doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome, and may even need medical attention. Now that's the situation for the hard drinker. But what about the real alcoholic? Now we come to that point, that real alcoholic. He may start off a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. He may or may not. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Now that's so important. That's so important. And I underline that. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Here is a fellow who is puzzling you, especially in the lack of his control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom, line this part right here, he is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world. I didn't underline that one. Yet let him take a drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. I underline that. He has the positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. And I underline that because that's so true. But in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. Incredibly. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes. And he has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is a fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house, to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use combinations of high-powered sedatives and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. That's a controversy in Alcoholics Anonymous as drug addict versus alcoholic. And here in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and years ago, and when they wrote this book, one of the things that they absolutely agreed on, here was a guy or people or what, they said how many, they took high-powered sedatives or drugs with the liquor to quiet the nerves. And that's what happens today when we have a drug addict. Then comes a day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Again, morphine or some sedative. They use the word morphine. There's twice, and there is a solution in this chapter where people in Alcoholics Anonymous use drugs. So they had a problem back then. They may not have said it, but they did write about it. It says it here really clear. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanatoriums. Now it says, this is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. So the true, it gives you your out because of the behavior patterns vary. Remember that. So important. Someone might be saying, well, I didn't do that. Well, it says it right here. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. But this is a description. But this description should identify him roughly. Well, I identify. Why does he behave like this? I underline that line. I underlined it because I don't know why. I think probably I just wanted the answer. If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, D-E-B-A-C-L-E, or downhill thing, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Question mark. Why can't he stay on the water wagon? Question mark. Why does he become? What has become of common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Question mark. There's a powerful paragraph there. I underline the first part. Why does he behave like that? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? Why hasn't common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect and to other matters? All question mark. I underline this next line here. Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once at a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. And if these 100 drunks cannot answer the riddle, I can't answer the riddle. So I don't look for the answer anymore in that area. I never did from the moment that I underlined that line. People say, well, I want the answer. Why? Well, it says perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. And it says opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. It's so but the end of that line, we cannot answer the riddle. Wow. If these 100 drunks can't answer the riddle, I can't answer the riddle. I underline that whole little paragraph because when somebody asks me why, I give them that, and I say, here's the answer to that question. These 100 drunks couldn't answer it. I can't answer it. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. I underline this next part. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol whatsoever into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. I underline that because that is the alcoholic. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol whatsoever into his system, something happens. And that's what happens. I take a drink and something happens to me, both in the bodily and mental sense. And when that happens, it makes me virtually impossible to stop. It says it right there. That's what happens. That's the answer. What happens when I pick up a drink? What happens? Something happens bodily and mentally, which makes it impossible for me to stop. The answer. Wow. The answer to that question. I don't have to go any further than these black lines here. It's just so. Oh, I get so excited. I get excited. I get excited. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. And I underline this next part. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. My mind, that obsession to drink. And upon taking that drink, it goes into the other areas. The craziness and all the things that I mentioned before. But the mind is the one that starts it out. If you ask him why he started on his last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have certain plausibility, and I underline this, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic drinking bout creates. But none of them really makes the sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw the fallacious reasoning to the attention of the alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. How many times have I done that? Once in a while he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more reason or no more idea why he took the first drink than you have. Some drinkers may have excuses which are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really do not know why they do it. Once this melee has really took hold, has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that someday, they will beat the game. And I underline this next statement. But they often suspect that they are down for the count. They often suspect that they are down for the count. And that was me. I suspected I was down for the count. How true it is, it goes on to say, few realize, in a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopeful awaits the day when the sufferer will arouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. Now there's a hope line for the non-drinker, but in the next sentence, it gives another powerful line to the reader, to us, to the alcoholic, and to the hopeful non-drinker. The tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. I have underlined that. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. That whole last part was underlined and so beautifully put. I want to read it one more time because it says what it says better than I can say it. I sometimes want to put words in here, but this says it so much better than I can say it. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. And that's the way they used to come in. The fact, and I underline this, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. I underline that because that's it. That's the choice in drink. I have no choice. I have to drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into consciousness with effective force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. And I underline this next line here. We are without defense against the first drink. Now there is a line here in chapter 2, hidden, tucked away, that is our beginning of a knowledgeable of how what to do about a drink. We are without defense against the first drink. Boy, it gives chills up and down my spine. I am defenseless against that first drink. I will always remain defenseless against that first drink. But I have learned how to defend against that first drink. I have, through the process of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous and through Alcoholics Anonymous. But there it is. We are without defense against the first drink. And I said many years ago, yes, I am. Yes, I am. I have no defense. The almost certain consequence that followed taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and rapidly supplanted with the old thoroughbred idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. This is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. There is a complete failure of any kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. I used to use that analogy, put my hand on a hot stove, and I remember I have my hand on that hot stove. I remember today. I can bring that into focus very quickly. Instant recall. The alcoholic may say to himself in most casual way, "It won't burn me this time, so here's how." Or perhaps he doesn't think it at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth poured on the bar and said to ourselves, "For God's sakes, how did I ever get started again?" Only to have that thought supplanted by, "Well, I'll stop after this sixth drink." And I underline this next line. What's the use anyhow? What's the use anyhow? I underline this next few lines. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. That's what I underlined. That's my end of my line, my result. That's what it comes to. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. And that's my story. That's exactly what will happen to me. I underline that, and that's so important. Beyond human aid, and I will be locked up or die or go permanently insane. These are stark and ugly facts that have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. And I underline this next line. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. How beautiful that is, huh? How beautiful of a hope line that is. The first mention of God, but if I'm in that hopeless state, why not say the word? Huh? Why not say the word? This next little line is in italics, and it says, "There is a solution." That's the name of this chapter. There is a solution. So it puts me in this melee, and then it gives me the solution, and it says it right in clear, italicized words. There is a solution. I underline this next part. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of our shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. The process. It mentions that word a couple of other times, but right there is process. I've said many times in my sobriety, this process, and there it is, the word process. There's nothing that I've ever said that's not written in the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's unbelievable. But I've always tried to come up with something a little bit more unique, but I never do, because here I used to say process. There it says process. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we have been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there's a beautiful line, I underline this, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. I underline that line. There was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. And if there's something else to be picked up, then I'm not going to make the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I can't pick up anything if I got something else to pick up. But if there's nothing left for me to pick up but that spiritual tools, the kit of spiritual tools, I have a chance. And it says that we have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. And I'll go on to talk a little bit about that later, but I've got to be at a point where I just pick up that simple kit, and that's all I have to do. I have underlined this next portion, and it is very important. It reads like this. The great fact is just this, and nothing less. The great fact is just this, and nothing less. That we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. And that experiences has a little asterisk on it, spiritual experiences. And I will go into that later on, but there is a portion in the back of the book that defines spiritual experience. Very important spiritual experience. So it reads that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. Now, that is probably the most how's the best way to put it? Deep is part of the experience of what this book or Alcoholics Anonymous represents. I'm going to read it again because it's that big. It is that big. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. That is underlined and is vitally important. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. I underline this next line. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. I underline this next part. If you are seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. Again, important. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. So if an alcoholic obviously isn't, in a serious condition, he has other ways, other roads, other portions, other things to do besides, going this way. But not so with this book. Not so with Alcoholics Anonymous. Not so with the alcoholics that are of this variety that they speak of in this book. So when difficulty arises, sometimes it may be because alcoholics have another road to go. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. I underline this next part. And if we had passed into a region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation at best. The other was to accept spiritual help. I mean, how simple of a fact that is. How exciting it was for me to know that there's no middle-of-the-road solution, that I'm in a position where I am, no human aid can help me, and that I only have two ways to go. One is to blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other, only one other, to accept spiritual help. So it makes it simple. It makes it so simple. There's no middle-of-the-road solution, which it says. I've passed into a region where there is no a return through human aid, which is great, and I got two alternatives. One is to go to the end, and the other is to accept spiritual help. There's a package deal right there in itself. It's just so beautifully put. I understand that. And when I work with other people, I try to make them understand that this, when there's 3 roads to go, I'm in a dither. When there's 2 roads to go and one is hell and the other is a possibility out of hell, it makes sense. Anyway, I don't want to get into my viewpoints, but that line is better than any words I could ever put. So I'm going to read it one more time because it is so important. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. No middle-of-the-road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into a region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but 2 alternatives. One was to go to the bitter end and blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation at best we could, and I underline this next little bit here, and the other was to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to. I underline this next little line, and we were willing to make an effort. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he had believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. I had that underlined. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time, because that got my interest up a little bit at the time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. I loved that so much. Went to the greatest doctor, and he was drunk, and he couldn't give a reason why. How beautiful, how beautiful. How beautiful a description of the alcoholic. So we returned to his doctor, whom he had admired, and asked him point blank what he could do. And he asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems. Yet he had no control whatsoever over alcohol. Why was this? Question mark. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key to hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. I'm going to read that one more time because it's again depicting the alcoholic. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. And it goes on, and this is so, again, that hopeful state for the alcoholic, that hope. You know, I can see myself in that state. What am I to do? What am I to do? How, why, all these questions, you know. And the doctor himself, the great physician himself says, no, I got to be locked up. But here's the next line, and it just negates all that doctors and everybody, says. And here it is. But this man still lives and is a free man. I underline that. This man is a free man. I love that statement. This man and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. I underline this. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster. And the little kicker here, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. So there's a little kicker in there. Provided he remains willing, just willing, to maintain a certain simple attitude. Boy. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with the doctor. This is the way it is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The doctor said, quote, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind exists to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" The doctor said, "Yes." "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to such cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences." And I underline that, spiritual experiences. Again, I want to say that again loud and clear to hear that, spiritual experiences. I'm going to read this line one more time here. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. Now remember we spoke about the spiritual experience on the page before, that the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had a deep and effective spiritual experience. Well, here it is again. Here it is again in the doctor's reply to this man who asked, "Is there no exception?" And the doctor says yes. And what was it? A vital spiritual experiences. And the doctor goes on to say, he says, "To me these occurrences are phenomena." I underline this next part because this depicts, this describes, this elucidates, whatever, I can't even say the word. But the spiritual experience, what actually happens? People, ask, what is a spiritual experience? What happens? What, blah, 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 blah. Well, this is it. Here's the answer. They appear to be in the nature of a huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which once were the guiding forces of our lives, of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. I underline that whole little thought there. Now that is a spiritual experience. I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read it slower, because these words are the most powerful words for the conqueror of the illness known as alcoholism. And here they go again. The doctor says, "Yes," replied the doctor. They're called vital spiritual experiences. Spiritual experiences. And the person clamors out, wow, what are they? To me, these occurrences are phenomena. And here it is. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which once were the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. So the sick head of my sick thinking are now rearranged and displaced, and that ideas and emotions and attitudes which once were the guiding forces in my head are now suddenly cast to one side. And notice it says cast to one side. It doesn't say disappear, let go. It just says cast to one side. That means they're still there. They're just cast to one side. And a completely new set, and that's the principles of this program, new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate, take over, dominate them. And that's the spiritual experience. It's exciting. It's exciting to know. It's exciting to know what I suffer from. It's exciting to know what's going to conquer. It's exciting to know these things. Because so many... If the answers of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, if people say, well, the only authority and the answers are all written, but where are they? I always want to know, where are they? Well, there's one big one. There's one big, beautiful answer. What happens to me? And it's so beautifully put, but so vitally important. Because this is the conqueror, as I'll explain later when we start with chapter, to tie in a few things. But this is it. That's it. There's no other thing that conquers the illness of alcoholism except this. According to the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, I don't want to get into chapter 4 right now, but when we do, I'll just come back to this and explain a little bit about it. We will go on. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangements within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. And there's a little italicized thing there, and you can go back to the appendix and read that. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. So this hope, however, was destroyed in this man, because the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Now remember, you can that spiritual experience again, the rearrangement, the emotional displacements and rearrangements, huge. And ideas and emotions and attitudes. Oh, that's the spiritual experience. The spiritual experience. And again, it says that it's a vital that he didn't have it with his religious background. So here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of a drowning man. I underline this next part here. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. And I stopped, period, right there. But I underline that little bit. Let's just take that one little step back up. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proven to be the loving and powerful hand of God. I'm not into preaching or anything like that, but there's a little hope for somebody. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. Wow. So at first I just, it's nothing. And then bingo, there it is. Yeah, I need that. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experiences, that's in quotes, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. That's a very important line there. Okay? That's underlined. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. That goes to me. So if somebody has another way, I say, okay, fine, do it. Do it. I'm sober, I do it this way, that's all. But if you've got another way and you're sober, fine. And there's the line. What do I do if somebody has another way? Well, we have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. That's so important. That's so important. I got to know that. I got to know that so I don't have to pound it into somebody's head. This is the only way. This is the only way. No. The Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, no, that's not true. So it's so important. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are children of a living Creator with whom we may, from a relationship upon simple understanding, terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. I'll read that again because I think I didn't read that too good. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are children of a living Creator with whom we may form a relationship upon a simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. I got a little wordy with that. I'm not the greatest reader in the world, so and I don't want to be perfect on this thing. So that's why if you hear a little fumbling here, it's not the writing in the book, it's the reader. But I think it would be wrong of me to go out and take reading lessons. But that's a beautiful line there. That's a beautiful line. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. There is no friction among us over such matters. Period. I mean, isn't that magnificent? I underline that last line because, I never had any friction because it tells me that these 100 drunks didn't have any friction. Well, if they didn't have any friction, I don't have any friction. And I'm just following as I'll, when we go on further down the road a piece, I'll show you just what we're following here so that, you all know. Anyway, let's go on here. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Now I'm going to read that again because it's important. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or present choice. Gives you your right. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. These words are every word, even though I don't underline these words, are important. They're not. I'm not trying to slough over or emphatically put down here what I think. They're all important. They're all important. This is the solution. There is a solution. This is alcoholism, what we're talking about, and this is the book of Alcoholics Anonymous that we're reading here, and they're all important. There is nothing here that is not important. The identification to every line here is what's happened to me over the years that I've been sober. I don't have any pet lines. When I was new, because I didn't know any better, yes, but as I've gotten older, I have no pet lines. They're all important. They all have the same weight. And so, I even though it's not underlined, I'm only underlining from years ago. I haven't underlined anything in my book in, I don't know, maybe 15 years. 12, 13, 14 years, somewhere in there. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. So there's the following chapters that will be read. They'll depict alcoholism as these 100 drunks understand it. And then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many whom were once in this class and now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Again, the word spiritual experience. So, that the convictions of anyone, there's your line. It says, well, I believe in this. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Buddha. I'm a this. We find such convictions no great obstacles to a spiritual experience. So you see, it makes it so easy for the alcoholic. I want to pick up that kit that's laid at my feet. I have no middle-of-the-road solution. And I don't have anything that's standing in my way, including beliefs in God, because the spiritual experience is what conquers the illness, and it has no bearing on what religion or faith or denomination I am. Nothing has anything to do with the spiritual experience. And next is a line that I've underlined, and it is it's really some line. I chortle a little bit when I look at it, and well, here it is. Further on, and I've underlined this, further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. Wow. I mean, so many people, in the years, I don't know how, and there it is, in beautiful black letters, and it says it. Further on, clear-cut directions are given, showing how we have recovered. These are followed by 36 personal experiences. Those are the stories, and we want to read the stories, but we're just going to get into the text. So, but many a times, I don't know. I know just in my case, but I wanted desperately to figure, how does this work? What do I do? How, why, all these questions. And when it goes on to say that further on, clear-cut directions. Clear-cut directions. Now, if I wanted to go from my house to downtown, and a guy gave me a map, and I really wanted to get downtown, I'd follow the map. I wouldn't go off into nowhere. If I wanted to go to a party and somebody said, I'm going to give you clear-cut directions, well, I'd follow them. I'd really follow them. If somebody was going to give me, gin for the rest of my life and give me clear-cut directions to his house, I'd go. I'd follow those directions to a T. Now somebody says to me, I'm going to give you your life. I'm going to give you a way of life. Your life and a way of life. And I'm going to give you clear-cut directions. And that's what I found that this line meant to me. It gave me my direction. And it is so clear in my head. It is so. It's clear-cut directions is what it is. And so I just pass that on to the listener and listeners, whoever. But it's a beautiful line. Each individual in the personal story is described in his own language and from his own point of view, the way he established his relationship with God. That's in the individual stories. These give a fair cross-section of our membership. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. So we speak again of clear-cut idea of what has happened in their lives. This next portion here, there's a little story involved in this, and I'll get into it in a second. But I just want to get down to what we. I have a couple of things underlined here, and 3 things actually. 2. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women, and that included me because I'm a man. And I underline this next line because it is, again, a powerful line and depicting where I am. Desperately in need. Now, if I am not desperately in need, I won't have to do the things, say the things, see these pages, or do anything. I will just be, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not desperately in need. So it says, it puts it up front. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, desperately in need. That's sort of an ego deflating thing, because when you think about it, somebody says, I can't get it, I can't get it, I can't get it, I can't get it. Well, if they're desperately in need of, if nothing's left but for them to pick up the kit, if they don't if they have a middle of the road solution, but if there is no middle of the road solution, then they use these words. They're just ego deflating things. Obviously, if I'm trying to do it another way, I have another way to go instead of I have another solution. You see, I don't have to follow clear-cut directions. I don't have to really go downtown. I could stay uptown for a while and drink. I mean, how do you, cut up clear-cut directions, or desperately in need of, or there is no middle-of-the-road solution? I don't know. I've never, come across anything. In my sobriety, that's the way it's been. It's been, this is the way it goes. That's the way you do it. And if you don't do it this way, you're going to get drunk. Oh, okay, I understand. And so here it is again. desperately in need. They didn't say our hope that many alcoholic men and women will see these pages. No. They put that little phrase in there, desperately in need. And so, anyway, I get kind of excited, but when there's other ways, when I don't have to follow these directions, when I don't have to do what's written here, I'm really not, in a bad state. And that's a blow to the ego, because everybody wants the outline or thinks about it. And in this book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's the lock lines. They lock me in. But the locking me in paradoxically gets me out. So our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages. And we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say. And I have this next part underlined, and here's where the little story evolves around this. I wanted myself, in the early years of my sobriety, to come up with things that weren't written in the book. I would once in a while think that I came up with an original idea. And one of the ideas that I came up with was a word. It was called thing. And I used to go around saying, well, this thing in AA, and I couldn't put a word to it. And so I sort of felt kind of unique and kind of say, well, I finally got something that's my own and it's not in the book. And I went on to that. And I learned, like I said earlier, that the book of Alcoholics Anonymous has been, will be, and will continue to be the whole and complete answer for me as an alcoholic to the alcoholic situation that I was in many years ago. And this clinched it for me. This next line clinched it for me. Because I was going along, I really don't remember how long I was sober. Maybe I was sober, I don't know, 2-3 years when I was going through this little period. And then I picked up the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and sure enough, I saw it, and this is what it said. I'll read into it again. We believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. Spiritual experience from the appendix. We spoke about that early on, and I'd like to tuck this in at the end of this chapter so that at least we have it as explained in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is from the appendix 2, Spiritual Experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet, it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of a sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described, though it is not our intention to create such impressions. Many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experience are what the psychologist William James calls the educational
variety.